In tonight's podcast, I've got Daniel with me. And Daniel had a very scary encounter with what I believe is a demon when he was about 5 or 6 years old. At this property they called the House on the Hill, him and his brother had several experiences with this entity, and I'm going to let him go into that in just a second. He's also going to talk about an encounter with an angel that his mother-in-law had. Very interesting stuff, guys. We're going to break that down and dive into that in just a second. But before I do, I just want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate all the support. Let's just jump right into the story. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh, it's good to see you, and it's good to be back, man.
Man, I'm very honored that you're here. Thanks for taking the time to share this with our audience. So take us back to when you were about 5 or 6 years old and walk us through this encounter.
So let me preface this by saying I've always felt that I'm sensitive to these type of things. So the House on the Hill is reference to a house that my dad had bought. And I don't really remember ever moving into the house, but this house was up on a hill in Tacoma, Washington, and it overlooked Interstate 5. It was a two-story house, had a detached two-car garage. It was a nice neighborhood. I remember, feeling something when I was younger, playing in the playroom. I'd hear stuff like psst, psst, like someone was trying to get my attention. I'd turn around and I wouldn't see anything. I thought maybe it was my dad or my mom, looking in, playing a game or whatever, trying to scare me or whatever. But, nothing. I just never saw anything. Well, then when we moved upstairs, as you come up the stairs at the top of the landing, there's a window. You turn to your right, it opens up to a huge room. My brother and I, when he was old enough, we shared bunk beds. I slept on the top, he slept on the bottom. And the way the bunk beds was facing, I could lay next to the window, sit up, look out the window, lay back down, whatnot. And I remember looking out this window at night, and you could see Tacoma. All the lights, and you saw the cars driving along the interstate, and a lot of times I'd wonder, where are they going? What kind of cars are those? So many different lights. And if you look down the road, down the street that we lived on, there was 4 or 5 like street lights, and then the road turned to the left, and right as that past that turn, there was a pedestrian bridge. And you could barely see it from my window. So I remember one night, something just compelled me to look out the window. And so I looked out the window and I look at the lights, and then I stick my head back down, and I hear in my head, "Hey, you missed me. I told you to look." And I'm 5, maybe 6. Maybe, and I look up and I don't see nothing. So I put my head back down, and then I look up again for whatever reason, and then I see somebody or something standing at the street light that's just as the road starts to turn, and it's standing right there in the glow of the light. And I kind of look, and then I duck back down. And then I hear in my head, "Oh, you did see me. Well, I saw you." And I look back up. I'm getting goosebumps. I look back up, and now the figure was at the next light, one more closer to my house. And so I duck back down, and I hear, "I told you to look." And I look back up, and it's closer. And I start freaking out. I start screaming at the top of my lungs. My dad comes running upstairs, followed by my mom. "What's going on? What's going on?" I tell my dad what's going on. By this time, my little brother's losing his mind because, he's probably 2 at the time. And he's screaming because I'm screaming. And, I tell my dad, I'm like, "Hey, Dad, this is what I saw." And so my dad runs downstairs. And I hear him go out the back door. I hear him go out into the garage, grabs his flashlight. I'm looking out the window. My mom's trying to console my brother. She's calming him down. I look out. I don't see anything, but I see my dad like going around, because the window overlooked the driveway and the garage, and then where the house is situated, it was all just like an open area. There was really no room to build anything over there. And so he's looking around, flashlight. He goes all the way down to the bend of the road, and he's looking around. I see his flashlight moving around, and he comes all the way back. And he comes up. He's like, "Buddy, there's nothing. There's nothing down there." So our neighbor across the street was a big old biker. This guy comes over because I guess we had made such a ruckus that he came over and asked if we were okay. He goes, "I heard, the kid screaming last night. Is everything okay?" And he goes, my dad goes, yeah, he just had a nightmare. I remember this big mountain of a man, big rings on his, leather jacket or leather vest. He's like, "Hey, little man, don't you worry about anything. As long as I'm around, I'm never going to let anything happen to you." And for some reason that made me feel good, because here's this big, tough biker guy across the street, Not only my dad, my dad was a tough guy too, but, here's this guy that we see every once in a while. Now he's going to come to my aid. But see, that wasn't the only weird thing going on at that house. The closet I mentioned earlier, I remember one time coming upstairs. I think my brother was about 3. So I'd maybe about 5. And I hear him laughing. And I'm like, well, what's he laughing at? And he's sitting probably, 6 feet in front of the closet. And I see him roll a ball into the closet. And I go, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Watch." And the ball comes rolling back out of the closet. Now I'm like, And I go, "Do that again." So he does it again. And then the ball rolls out. And then my brother starts laughing again. And I go start walking towards the closet. My brother's like, "Stop. They don't like you, Bubby. You need to leave. Go now." And he yells at me. So I go down and tell my mom. I go, "Mom, something's in the closet and it's rolling the ball back to Bobby." And she's like, "Whatever." I'm like, "Mom, I saw it happen. And he told me to leave. He screamed at me." Well, she comes up and she looks and she doesn't see nothing. She doesn't see nothing at all. She's like, "Oh, you boys, you guys are, whatever. Just play, stop fighting." So my mom goes downstairs and I'm talking with my brother. And so I get the ball and I roll it. Nothing rolls out. And I go, "How did you do that?" He goes, and he looks at me just as serious as could be. He goes, "Bubby, they don't like you. You need to leave now." And so he has a ball and he rolls it into the closet, and then both balls come out. And I'm like, whoa. So that was weird. And then we used to have this big steamer trunk that my dad had bought, and he converted it into a toy box for us. So our mom and dad were out doing something, and we had a babysitter named Susie. She comes over, and she would always play hide and seek with us. So we want to play hide and seek. So she starts counting, and we run upstairs. Now, she knows what we're doing. She knows where we're going. There's really no place to hide upstairs. The closet, the toy box, or under the bed. Okay? Plain and simple. Well, we jump into the toy box and we cover ourselves up. We're thinking we're completely camouflaged. They can't see us. She can't see us. And I look over at my brother and I go, "Shh, here she comes." I hear her open up the door to come upstairs. And about that time, the lid on this thing slammed shut. And it slammed shut so hard that we could hear her. And she went from walking up the stairs to running up the stairs. And we're trying to open it. And she's yelling at us, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Get out of there." And we're trying to open it. We're screaming and we're crying because now we can't open it. She's trying to open it. She had to go outside, and the biker guy, he came over with a set of tools, and he was taking the hinges off. and he had to take the hinges off this steamer trunk and lift this lid off of us because it for some reason it was locked, but there was no lock on it. They could not open it up. So he took the lid off of it, and when that was all said and done, my mom and dad had pulled up and saw him coming out of the side door with Susie, and Susie was all upset and stuff, and it's my wife, and she was all upset and she was crying. She's telling what happened, and my dad comes upstairs and he's looking at it. He's like, I don't see how this could happen. And without even missing a beat, my brother looked at me. He goes, "See, I told you they didn't like you." And that was it. We had no more toy box.
That's scary. I mean, honestly, that's very scary. And I think a lot of times as Christians, as believers, we don't think about, the spiritual world and the things that we battle that aren't flesh and blood, that we can't see, unless obviously they show themselves to you, I guess. And when you looked out that window and you heard that thought, because I firmly believe that Satan can implant a thought in your mind, he does it to people all the time. But when you heard that and you looked out that window, describe for us, if you can, kind of what you saw and any kind of feeling that you had. Obviously fear, but kind of go into that if you can a little bit.
Well, from what I can remember, again, it was a dark figure. I didn't see too many like facial features because it wasn't like it was standing directly underneath the light. So it wasn't directly in the light. It was just on the outside of the light, but you could still definitely see a figure. It didn't look like a man. And when he said it, it wasn't like, "Oh, so you did see me." It was like, "Ah, you did see me. And I saw you." And you're right. I was scared. I was terrified. I mean, 5 maybe, just freaking out, losing my mind. I mean, I told that I know what I saw. It was out there, and it wasn't. I think when I started losing it was when it was like we had one that was right, not like at the end of our driveway, but maybe like 6 feet over from our driveway, and then it had another one that was maybe, I'm not good at the distances on how far it was, maybe 25 yards, and then another whatever. It was at that one. So if I would have ducked down without freaking out and then looking back up, there's no doubt in my mind it would have been standing at the one right next to our driveway. That's how close it was.
Wow. That's crazy, Daniel. That's very scary, man. And I think that every day we're around this stuff, we just don't see it. And I think that it's very important that we know what we're fighting, and what we're praying against and things like that. And I'm glad that you and your brother made it through that place. And obviously, I guess you guys moved on from there. But thanks for sharing that with us, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. But why don't you? I know this is probably really personal, but why don't you talk us through this experience that your mother-in-law had?
Sure. Well, she actually had 2 of them. Okay. I just talked to her like last week or a week before last, and she even said, she believes wholeheartedly that she saw an angel. Not once, but twice. And I'll tell you about the first time after I tell you the second time, because this is when it's kind of intriguing because I was actually in this house. It was my father-in-law's parents' farm. And this farm is a working farm. It's been a working farm for like 150 years. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that his dad was born in this house. And when it was his time to go, he was actually in the room that he was born in. And all the family was gathered, and as he was taking his last breaths, my mother-in-law looked over to the window and saw something standing there and then walk away. And she believed she saw an angel. And she said for a second it looked like a tumbleweed going by. And then shortly after, he passed away. So, and she doesn't show fear about it. It was like, oh, God. I mean, I don't know how she felt. I'm assuming because my mother-in-law is a very, very godly woman. I mean, when it's Lent, she gives up something. She does not stray from it. She prays. She says a rosary. She was raised Catholic, but converted to being a Lutheran because that's what my father-in-law is a Lutheran. But she says a rosary every day. She prays every day. She goes on walks. She has, a Bible study. So I know this woman is not making anything up. And I think she thinks it might have been a blessing that God sent someone down to carry her father-in-law home.
There's definitely peace in that. I don't understand how all that works, but I do believe that, God brings us home. It says to be absent with the body is to be present with the Lord. And I think that, that we'll walk through that process, so that I believe that was a blessing that God gave her to have peace with that,
But I mean, how cool is it? It's in the house that he was born in, and not just the house, but the very room, So it's where he came into the world, and it's where he's leaving the world, so. And so the very first experience, this happened in Blaine, Minnesota. And my brother-in-law was just a year old, and my mother and father-in-law were out riding a bike. And they were on a bike ride. My brother-in-law was on like in a seat on my father-in-law's bike, and they were hit by a car. And my mother-in-law went one way, and my father-in-law and my brother-in-law were thrown another way. And my mother-in-law says she saw a hippie, as she describes him. He had a headband on, and he had chaps. And he was standing over her. And she was laying there. She goes, I was dazed and I couldn't move. I think she like broke her hip or something like that, or her pelvis or something. I know she was injured pretty bad, and she couldn't focus. And she goes, he was just there. He was just there. And she's trying to talk, and she's like, my baby, do you see him? Do you see him? And she said he looked around and he goes, no, I don't see him, but I hear him. And it's like at that moment she's asking for him is when my brother-in-law started crying, crying out, and she goes, do you see my husband? And then he's like, yes, I see him walking around. He appears to be dazed. And she goes, I felt so comfortable with him there. She believes it might have been an angel comforting her and letting her know that everything's okay.
The first thought that comes to mind, Daniel, is the huge difference in between your experience with a demonic presence, what I believe was, and an experience with an angel of light, of God. One brings fear, the other brings peace, because all there are is that there's light and dark, and that's all there is. There's no gray. It's either light or it's dark. And I believe that God absolutely in the middle of our storm will bring peace. And I don't know how you believe about angels, but I believe that they're dispatched out to do God's work. I think that we have guardian angels, and I think that they, they're there watching over us. And obviously, I believe that, and I've never met your mother-in-law, but I believe that's what she saw, because it brought her peace. And that's a really incredible story, man. And I appreciate you sharing that with our audience. And when you talk to her, tell her I said thank you for letting her share that story, or letting you share that story.
Oh, I will. Well, it's like I told you, and I asked you a question one time. I said, is God going to send an angel? Is that angel going to appear as an angel, or is it going to appear as something that may comfort us? But yeah, I think God knows when you need a sign.
He does. And I think that, he was very clear that when he left, he was going to send the Comforter, right? I mean, when Jesus and when he rose from the grave on the third day, and after he was here, I believe he was here with 40 days, I think. And then he, rose and he said, I have to leave so I can send the Comforter. And I think God Obviously, he knows your heart. And who am I to say all the mysteries in God's universe and how everything works? None of us really know, but I do believe God sees our hearts, and he cares about the things we care about. He loves us. And so, I think it's awesome that he reaches out to his children, and he brings peace and comfort. And, he's always talking if we'll listen. And, going back to the story about your mother-in-law, her second encounter that you shared, my grandpa, I'll try not to get emotional because he was so special to me, but he passed away this last year, and 93 years old, man, had an amazing life. And he passed away with 4 ministers at his bedside, his children around him singing songs about the Lord. And anyways, he'd kind of been in a coma, and my mom was there. Really hard for her to see that, and my grandma obviously was there. But they were married over 70 years, long time. Yeah, long time. And my grandpa was always very scared to death. But he'd been in a coma, couldn't talk, and he looked up. We knew it was time for him to go, and my mom's telling me this. I wasn't there, but said he looked up and he looked at my mom, and they locked eyes for a while, and he looked past my mom and looked at my grandma, and they locked eyes and looked at each other for a really, really long time, and had a moment. And then he looked up, and he had this expression on his face like he saw something, and he passed. But when he looked up, there was just so much peace in that room. And that's our hope, man. That is our hope, because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. As you know, we've all lost loved ones way too soon, but we never lose anybody, because I know that my grandfather, he's very much alive. And as a believer, to know that, nobody wants to die, but when we do pass, man, there's brand new life waiting on us on the other side, and it will be with the Lord. And that's the peace and comfort that we have. But man, I appreciate you being here, man, and sharing those encounters. And my hope is with this podcast is that it draws people to Christ, man, and that the body is aware that these supernatural things are there, and it's important that we talk about them, and it's important that people share their encounters. So I appreciate it again, man.
Well, I got a couple more, and we can do that at another time, but I actually sent you those, and you read them. Irene and Myrtle and the pond. And yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep. No, we'll have you back on and share those encounters. And guys, it's very important that you open your eyes spiritually. You realize that it's so easy to get caught up in this world, in this flesh, but this is not all there is. And as a believer, we have a lot of amazing things waiting for us, and it's important to hold on to your faith. I hope this podcast brought you encouragement. And if you guys need prayer, if you ever need prayer, you can always reach me at video@jscreativear.com. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Stay prayed up. It's so very important. We'll talk to you next episode.